Listen to a discussion in an anthropology class.
So, I'd like to move on to a discussion of a group of people who vanished from the Earth around 30,000 years ago after having existed successfully for approximately 250,000 years. They're known as the Neanderthal people, named, by the way, after a place in Germany where their bones, their remains, were first found in 1856. Now, let's first look at how these people compared with the other main group of humans existing at that time, known as the Cro-Magnon. Now, the remains of Cro-Magnon people show that they were anatomically similar. In other words, their body structure was physically more or less identical to modern humans. Okay, does anyone know how our Cro-Magnon ancestors look different from these Neanderthals?
Didn't they have a different skull shape?
Yes. But can you be more precise?
Okay. The Neanderthals had a sloping forehead and no real chin.
Okay. Certainly, their chins were not prominent and their foreheads sloped backwards. So they looked rather different from the Cro-Magnon. Okay. Now, what about their cultural and technological lives? Were they so much different from their Cro-Magnon cousins? Yes?
They had the ability to make stone tools, so that was a similarity.
Yes, although their tool-making ability appears to have been less developed than that of the Cro-Magnon. They did know how to make stone into useful tools, but they don't appear to have developed fine points or blades. And their wooden spears seem to have been adapted for stabbing, but not for throwing. The Cro-Magnon, on the other hand, developed spears with tips carved from bone and stone and other materials. They also used bows and arrows and invented handles for their tools and weapons. Now, those are things the Neanderthals didn't develop. Yes?
Well, didn't the Neanderthals know how to make fire?
Yes. Now, that's a very good point. They could make fire and transport it when necessary. And that is an important skill that they shared with the Cro-Magnon. Also, they may have had some simple art forms, but again, fairly undeveloped in comparison with the Cro-Magnon, whose artistic sophistication is well documented. But, there's a recent find, a polished baby mammoth tooth, which suggests that the Neanderthals may have produced items for personal adornment. Now, both these points show that the Neanderthals may not have been as backward as was once claimed.
Do you think the Neanderthals had the ability to produce language?
Oh, now that's an interesting question. Studies of skull capacity and shape indicate that they probably had similar neurological capacities to modern humans. So, in other words, they certainly had the mental apparatus to produce language. Now, by examining the bone remains of the vocal tract area, we can say that they could produce sounds, too, but they would not have been able to produce a large number of sounds, and their speech articulation may have been slow. By contrast, the Cro-Magnon would have had the ability to produce language and speech sounds just as modern humans. Okay. So what happened to the Neanderthals? Well, this question has produced a lot of controversy, even division, within the scientific community. So, broadly speaking, we can say that there are two main lines of thought here. First, it's possible that the Neanderthals may have died out due to a relative lack of sophistication in comparison to the Cro-Magnon. The Cro-Magnon people arrived in regions inhabited by Neanderthals about 40,000 years ago. And then around 30,000 years ago, the climate became more severe, and the Cro-Magnons would have been better adapted to survival under these conditions, since they had, as we noted earlier, better weapons and tools and more developed speech. So, in competition for territory, or in hunting, they would have been more successful. Some people have gone so far as to suggest that the Neanderthals were deliberately destroyed by the newcomers, or perhaps killed off by diseases brought in with them. So that's one general line of thought. Now, a second approach is to hypothesize that the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnon interbred, and that over time the Cro-Magnon genes became more dominant, so that eventually the Neanderthal characteristics disappeared. During the same period, the Neanderthal culture would also have been absorbed into the more dominant Cro-Magnon culture. If they did manage to interbreed, this would mean, of course, that the two types of people were not separate species. And if this scenario is right, it would have appeared as though the Neanderthals had become extinct, whereas in reality they would have merged with the more dominant Cro-Magnon people. Now, I want to emphasize that this issue is still very much debated by anthropologists. A lot of the focus of current research is on trying to determine whether either Cro-Magnon remains or modern humans have any traces of Neanderthal DNA. If they do, then a better case for claiming that the two peoples interbred could be made, and hence the second of these two hypotheses would be strengthened.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 24. What is the main purpose of the lecture? 25. Why does the professor say this?
They were anatomically similar. In other words, their body structure was physically more or less identical to modern humans.
Why does the professor refer to the Neanderthals' ability to make and transport fire? 27. What does the professor not mention about the Neanderthals' use of language? 28. Indicate whether each sentence below describes Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon characteristics. 29. According to the professor, why is a comparison of Neanderthal and modern human DNA useful?